Thanks very much, Isabel. Hi, everyone. Welcome along to this session. Thanks so much for joining live, and hi to everyone who's watching the recording a bit later. So my name's Andrew Mower. Just really quick little bit about me, just so you know who I am, who's going to be talking to you for the next hour or so. So my name's Andrew Mower. Quick history about me. I started my finance career at PwC in the UK, up in Leeds, in the north of England. Spent a few years there and trained to be a chartered accountant. Did all my exams at Kaplan. You know what? I loved learning so much. I joined Kaplan. So I became a tutor at Kaplan down in London. So I moved back south in the UK, down to London. And I worked at Kaplan for 10 and a bit years, including some manager roles and managing tutors, and did met some amazing students and helped literally thousands of people to pass their exams, which was an amazing experience. I then left Kaplan and started doing my own things, including working with ACCA. So as you can tell, I'm now doing the AFM expert tutor role, so helping students to pass AFM. And off the back of that, I've set up my own tuition stuff as well, Andrew Mower Tuition, and offering my own AFM courses through AMA Learn Online. So that's a brief history about me. I know you're not here to hear about me. You want to know how to pass AFM. So we're going to get into that very shortly. Right, three numbers are on the screen. Why do you think these three numbers are on the screen? 47, 48, 49. Why have I given you these numbers? What is this about? What do you think? Just pop that into the attendee chat. Why have I put these three numbers? What do these numbers mean to you? A couple of thumbs down flying in. Any thoughts on these three numbers? What? Pass rates. It's not a bad guess. It's not a bad guess. It's not quite where we're going. Yeah, brilliant. It's a common exam result. You're right. And it's a painful result that we're looking at here. It's these marks where you're so close to passing this exam, but you haven't quite got there. And what I want to emphasize today in this session is if you can just get a few more marks in the exam, you're going to stand a much better chance of passing. And that's what we're here today to do. Even if I can get you another 5 marks in this exam, that will really increase your chances of passing. So pay attention. I'm going to give you loads of tips. And when you get 52 in a few weeks' time, you can come back and say, oh, thanks, ACCA, for putting on this webinar, because those 5 marks have earned me that pass. Yeah, it's very disappointing. So no one wants to be in that category. So let's get those marks. Let's get every mark we can and get as high a score as possible. So what we're going to cover in this session, I'm going to give you some insights from the latest examiner's report. Now, that's from the September-December 2024 exam. So we're going to have a look at that, and I'm going to give you a few insights from the examining team. I'm going to then show you how you can make the most of the Study Hub, which is ACCA's brilliant free resource with loads of content and loads of questions to practice as well. So we'll have a look at that. I'm then going to talk you through some effective exam strategies that I recommend to my students to, again, get that structure right in the exam. And I'm really going to focus on some time management tips in there. I just saw a couple of you in the chat panel there saying time management, often an issue. Absolutely right. So I'll give you my tips on that. And then I'll leave some time at the end to answer your questions. So as Isabel said, you can pop those into the Q&A and I'll answer as many as I can. We do have a lot of people on live, so I can't promise to answer everything, but I'll do my best to get through as many as possible. Right, let's have a look at the September-December 2024 examiner report then. Now, this is available to you, the full report. It's quite a big document with lots of detail. So what I've done is I've taken that and I've distilled it into a few important takeaway messages for you today. So save you the time. Obviously, you can go away and read it all yourself, but these are the key messages that I want you to take out of this examiner report. Now, what would be really helpful for you after this session, if you haven't already at some point, would be to have a go at the September-December 2024 exam. So that is available on ACCA's practice platform. So you can do that actual exam, and then the examiner report tips and comments suddenly become a lot more relevant once you've tried the questions and you realize, oh, I see what they mean now about that particular topic. So really good idea for you to do that. I only got released recently, the September-December 2024 exam. So it's a really good one to practice before your exam. So you've still got 3 and a bit weeks until exam day, haven't you? So plenty of time to give that a go. Okay, now I'm not going to go into detail around each question. Obviously, going through a whole exam would take a long, long time. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the question, and then I'm going to give you the key tips that the examining team gave students in the examiner report. So question 1 in this exam was called North Co, which was a hedging question for 50 marks, which I'm sure lots of you would have loved. You're thinking, oh yeah, 50 marks on hedging. That is my absolute dream. The first bit was a little bit of discussion around some group treasury stuff and a group treasury function. There was then a multilateral netting question. You know the one I mean, where everyone owes each other money in different currencies and you have to net it off to make it a nice, neat structure. So that's always good fun and always a satisfying one if you've practiced that. We then had some foreign exchange futures and then interest rate collar, which again, sometimes brings people out in a bit of a cold sweat. But it's one of those things, if you work at it, it is okay. So there's a brief overview of what the question was about. As always in the 50 marker, you had your 10 professional skills marks, and there was a good mix of both calculations and discussion in this question. So here are some tips that the examining team gave relating to this specific question and hedging in more general terms. So any discussion of treasury, which is quite common in this exam, the examiner was really emphasizing the importance of using the scenario. Lots of students think, treasury function, I remember that. I'm going to tell them everything I know about treasury. But it's not really about that this exam. There's almost a little bit of SBL skills involved in this exam at times, using those exhibits and bringing them into your answer. One of my former students said to me, well, all the answers are in the exhibits. It's like, yeah, absolutely. Once you realize that, actually, all they're wanting me to do here is reference the relevant points and bring that into my answer. So really important, and a common theme, not just in the treasury stuff, but in other questions as well. Use the exhibits. There's loads of stuff in there that's really, really useful. Secondly, with hedging, you are going to get a hedging question in your exam, so you need to prepare yourself for it. Structure it properly. Now, if you've seen my debriefs, and I have done the hedging debrief for the March mock as well, which we'll talk about a bit later, I've got a really clear structure to my hedging questions. So buy or sell, number of contracts, expiry date, almost step by step. So work them through, label what you're doing as you work through your hedging calculations, and it becomes a lot easier for you, and also, importantly, a lot easier to mark. So some students, you can imagine, just a massive numbers, number of contracts here, buy this, sell that. It's like, whoa, as a marker, you're going, what is going on? If you structure it clearly, you are going to earn more marks. And as I say, it'll be much clearer in your head as well. So do show your workings throughout. Remember, in this exam, there's something called the own figure rule, OFR, which is a really nice little thing that markers use. If you've made a mistake early on, you then don't get punished for the same mistake again. So if you're doing a hedging question and you've said buy futures when it should be sell futures, you're not then going to lose the rest of the marks in the question. You'll still get the rest as long as you've done those calculations correct based on what you've got. So my saying that I always say to my students is just keep swimming. So just keep going. If you get a bit wrong, it's okay. Just keep going and you'll still pick up the rest of those marks. So keep showing your workings. And again, you will get more marks than you think sometimes. Even if your answer at the end is completely wrong, you still might have got 9 out of 10. And once you realize that, I said, oh, okay, I just need to keep going. I just need to persevere. So very, very important. Now, with hedging questions in general, there's often some advice involved, isn't there? So should you do this? Should you do that? And in this one, it might have been, should we use futures? Should we use collars? A lot of students just go at the end, their conclusion is just, yeah, we should use the interest rate collars. Okay, right, fine. Why? And that can be really brief, just saying because. It might be because they're the cheapest. It might be that they provide more flexibility if it's options. So just justify it. Doesn't take long, but just make sure you do justify your selection when you're advising on these questions. And the final point on this one, the single best way to prepare for hedging questions is to practice them. Now, if you've done enough hedging questions, you'll start seeing almost the same questions over and over again, just with a few slight differences here or there. So if you've practiced it enough and you get used to that technique and you get used to the step-by-step approaches, honestly, hedging is great. I love hedging. If hedging came up in my exam, if I were you and I saw hedging, I'd be like, brilliant, because I've done it so many times. You just go, right, I'm going to start with that. Then I'll do this. Then I'll do that. And you just get used to it. So it is all about the practice. And the examiner always says that. And that's what they said in the examiner report. Those students who've practiced it enough, again, you'll be absolutely fine. There might be a couple of bits that are a bit tricky in the question, but that's fine. Again, as long as you get most of it right, you're going to be absolutely fine when you do that. Okay, so that was question 1. A quick overview of that and a few really important tips around hedging as well. Question 2. Now, this September-December exam actually had 2 valuation questions in. Now, remember, this is like a hybrid paper. So some questions from September, some questions from December. So in the actual exam, there's probably some sort of investment appraisal going on. But in this one that they've released, it did have a couple of valuation questions, which is fine. So this one was called More Texaco, and we had to do a valuation using some PE ratios and discuss the impact on the company's earnings per share. There was then advice on acquisitions, and then there was a big discussion bit on competition authority and the role of the competition authority in the market. So in this one, the examining team said, when you're doing a valuation question, which again, very commonly tested, remember to include the value of synergy. Now, you've all seen this where there's PE ratios and you're having to value a company, you've got 2 companies merging, and you take their earnings, you take their earnings. But we need to also include the synergy when we're doing that calculation. So lots of students forgetting that. So that won't be you now, which is great. Also, amazingly, the examiner said lots of students didn't calculate the EPS, the earnings per share. It specifically said in the requirements, calculate the impact on earnings per share. So make sure you do that. Again, even if your numbers were wrong in the first part, if you do the EPS bit and work it out, you'll still get the marks, the own figure rule marks. So when it says impact on earnings per share, what you want to do is the earnings per share before the acquisition and then the earnings per share after the acquisition. And then you can compare the two, maybe even do a little percentage change in the 2 things. So remember to do that if they ask for it. It's a really important thing to look out for because, again, they're actually quite easy marks. Also, they often say find the additional value by making this acquisition. Now, what the additional value is the value of the company now, if they combine, versus what the value was before they did the acquisition. So just that little difference, again, it's just a quick, that minus that, and that'll give you the additional value. It's an easy mark, but lots of students forget to do that. So compare the new value with what the original value was to find that additional value. Another thing that lots of students went wrong with in this particular question was they were looking at it from the wrong shareholder perspective. So they might specifically say, calculate the gain to the acquiring company. So it could be Mortexa, or it could be the company they're buying that they're looking at. So read the requirement very carefully, and equally with the discussion points, are their shareholders likely to be happy with this? Just think, who are they talking about? Because a lot of students just go into a bit of a quick calculation without actually reading the question. If you do that from the wrong perspective, you're not going to get any marks because you're answering the wrong question. So just be very careful with the requirements there around the shareholders and which ones you need to discuss. And my final point here is around applying the scenario, not just repeating it. So I said earlier for the hedging question, a lot of the time the answers are in the scenario. Exactly the same with valuations, but you need to add value. You can't just copy and paste chunks of the exhibits into your answer. That's not going to get any marks. You need to then discuss why that's important, why that's relevant, and use that. So make sure you're adding value, not just copying and pasting. Copying and pasting will get you no marks. It's a waste of time. But if you use the information and add value to it, then yes, you're in business. Then you're getting some marks. Okay, so that was question 2. Again, once you've had a look at the question in detail, you'll sort of see in context a lot of what this means. But again, all of this stuff works really, really well in general valuation and M&A questions, which are very common. And then that third question was another valuation one with reverse takeovers as well, a question called Zoller Co. So this one had a dividend and a free cash flow valuation in. We then had to discuss that and also had discussion of reverse takeovers and IPOs. Now, something the examiner said that students struggled with was knowing which discount rate to use. And they did that classic thing where they give you both the cost of equity and the WACC. Like, okay, which one do I need to use for which? So if you're discounting dividends, you need to use the cost of equity as the rate. If you're using free cash flows to the firm, which they are in this question, FCFs, then you need to use the WACC as the discount rate. Now, that does differ if you're using free cash flows to equity. For that, you also use the cost of equity. But in this question, it was normal free cash flows, so you needed to use the WACC as the discount rate. So just remember that and just revise that if necessary to make sure you're using the correct rate. The other thing that you often have to do in these valuation questions is find free cash flows from profit figures. So they give you some sort of profit, then you need to work it back to get to your free cash flows. So know how to do that process. That's very important because, again, it's very common that you have to do that. Another thing that's really easy, but lots of students miss, and the examiner wanted to flag to you guys to help you out, ask yourself, are they saying they want it per share, or are they saying what's the total value? Again, an easy thing to get wrong, but also a very easy thing to fix. If they ask for the total value of a company, great. It'll be a big number, probably in the millions. Perfect. If they ask for value per share, then we just need to take that big number and divide it by the number of shares to get a per share figure. So be very careful. What are they asking for? Are we looking at total values, or are we looking out for the per share value? So be very cautious and conscious when you're reading the requirement as to which one they're looking for. Now, in this one, there was some discussion around the dividend valuation and then the cash flow valuation. And they wanted you to explain why you got different answers for each. So again, some people just said, oh, yeah, these numbers are different. Okay, fine. But why is that? So again, you need to make sure you're answering the requirement. Just make sure if it asks you for why, you need to go into a little bit more detail around that. And finally, IPOs and reverse takeovers. Now, IPO, so initial public offerings, get tested quite a bit. And then reverse takeovers, again, coming up every now and again now. There's a really good technical article on reverse takeovers on ACCA's website. So if you need a recap of that, just have a quick read of that technical article on reverse takeovers. It's really good. Gives you quite a lot of detail, but have a read of that and then you'll be much, much better prepared if that does come up. Because again, if it does, you want something to discuss. Okay, so there we go. They're the 3 questions and a quick overview with some tips in there. What I'm going to do now is think more generally what the examining team were advising students to do and what they were saying not to do. So here are some low quality answer traits. So this isn't going to be you guys because you've attended this webinar and you're all very hardworking, conscientious students. This isn't going to be you, but these is for other students. They perform calculations without really understanding what they're doing. So they're doing numbers without really knowing what they mean. And that becomes clear when they're not really labeling them or they're not necessarily showing exactly what they're doing when they do that. Low quality answers also just repeat the scenario without adding any value. So they're copying and pasting, as we said earlier, which is a bit of a waste of time. Now, this is an important one. They miss out part of the requirement. If you don't answer the requirement, if you miss out parts, you're definitely going to get 0, aren't you? Now, it's a very obvious thing to say. If you don't write anything for that requirement, you will get 0. So you need to make sure you're answering everything within the requirements. And you know, some of these requirements have little bits to them, don't they? It's like part A, but just within part A, they're asking you to do 3 or 4 things. Look out for the word and. So it might say calculate earnings per share and comment on your answer, or and discuss the assumptions. So look out for that word and to make sure you are answering every bit. The other thing that I really like is to set up your subheadings. So at the very start of your questions, set up the requirements as subheadings. And then by breaking down the requirement into subheadings, it really forces you to answer every single bit. So if part A has asked you to do 3 things, set up part A and then have 3 subheadings for each of the bits of the requirement at the very start. So do that at the beginning of the questions, and that will really help you to avoid missing parts of the requirement. The other thing is around skepticism. Now, at the ACCA conference last year that I went to, the examining team said there are 2 of the professional skills categories that AFM students struggle with. One of them is around professional skepticism, and the other one is commercial acumen. Now, to get skepticism marks, and by the way, remember the professional skills mark are 20 marks. It's a lot, isn't it, in this exam? 20 marks available for these. So when you are doing calculations or if you're given some numbers, you need to challenge them. If I said to you, oh yeah, I'm doing a project, inflation's going to be 20% each year on the sales, you need to go, whoa, Andrew, 20%? Are you mad? Like, where's this figure from? That's really ambitious. And you need to take that level of skepticism into the exam and go, okay, they've given me these forecasts for evaluation or maybe for an NPV. Where are those numbers from? Like, where have these figures come from? So you need to challenge that. And remember, say 20% growth in sales seems ambitious. This is then likely to overstate the NPV, which could affect our decision. Or you might say, this is a new project in a new industry. So having such ambitious growth rates may be unrealistic. You can say why you think that may not be right. So that's a really, really good thing to do. So make sure you're challenging those assumptions. Now, this is probably, I'd say, the biggest risk to you guys in the exam. Like, if people say to me, I failed AFM and I don't know how to improve, I'm not sure what to do. This final point here is the thing that I'd say, have a think about this. The calculations in AFM are almost a time trap. And I often say to my students, they're a trap that you cannot fall into. There'll be an NPV and people get into it and they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing all my numbers, this is fun. And because there's an answer that you know that you need to get at the end, they're like, oh, I've got to get the NPV answer. I've got to get the NPV answer. Then they look at the clock and 35 minutes have gone and in a 25-mark question. So you've now got about, under 15 minutes left to do all of the discussion parts, which often carry, 10 marks. But the important thing is in the discussion, a lot of the professional marks are in there as well, because you're being skeptical and you're showing that commercial acumen. So if you focus on the calculations too much and don't get onto the discussion bits properly, you're not just losing the discussion marks, you're also throwing away a load of the easy professional skills marks. So what's the solution to this? With the calculations, you just need to do your best and move on. Get a number. And if that involves making up a number along the way, if you're stuck on the cost of equity or you can't work out the cost of debt, it's fine just to guess a cost of debt and go, right, 10%, that'll do. 10% is my go-to guess. And then get on to the next bit, get your NPV, get your valuation, whatever. It's not right, that doesn't matter. Get on to the discussion parts. So really want you to think about that. The calculations don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be amazing. You do your best, get some numbers down, but you need to leave enough time in the discussion parts. And if you do that, suddenly this exam becomes so much more achievable because you're like, oh, I'm now getting the commercial acumen. I'm applying it to the scenario. I'm using the exhibits and I'm demonstrating that skepticism that we just talked about as well. So that'd be my number one tip. Don't fall into the trap of the calculations. Got that? I can't see you, but I'm hoping you're all nodding going, yeah, we got it. Don't fall into the trap of spending too long on the calculations. I looked at a recent exam question the other day, which was one of those where you have to forecast the statement of financial position. The one that I'm talking about where it's like a reconstruction. You have to forecast the statement of financial position. And with the statement of financial position, as you know, it's meant to balance, isn't it? So it's a balance sheet. It's meant to balance. So I can just imagine students being like, I can't move on because this doesn't balance. I'm not moving on to the discussion bits because this statement of financial position isn't balancing. But honestly, you just need to go, it doesn't balance, never mind, get onto the discussion. Like, just take that attitude of, never mind, that's fine, we'll move on. Or if you want to be, if it really annoys you, put a miscellaneous balancing figure in just to make it balance. What do you call that in SBR? You call it like foreign exchange difference or something. Chuck that in, and then you can just move on to the next bit. So don't be a perfectionist with the calculations. So they're the low quality answers. That's not you guys. Here's you guys, high quality. Look at that surfer now. I just want you to look at the difference. This is that surfer falling off. Just to explain my choice of images here. This is this surfer riding the waves, high quality surfing, which is what you're going to be doing with the marks. So nice clear structure with narrative as you go. So labeling your workings, explaining what you're doing as you go through. Applying the concepts to the scenario you've been given and drawing conclusions. So advising, if you do an NPV, you need to say at the end, should they or shouldn't they do the project? If it's evaluation, you might want to just draw a conclusion as to which method's best. Laying out your answer well with headings. In your discussion parts, use headings, like use subheadings. Markers love headings and subheadings. Bold, underlined, leave a gap, spaces in between your paragraphs, 2 or 3 lines at a time, lovely. Do not, under any circumstance, give them a block of text. It's just painful to read it. You know what that's like, even if you get an email at work. Someone's just sent an email and it's about 4 pages long of text. This is so difficult to read. The markers want nice headings, neatly labeled, and make it easy to mark. And again, that's why breaking up the question into the requirements really helps as well. Challenge those assumptions, as I said. Get in the habit of, when you're reading the scenarios, go, they've said assume the cost of capital will stay at 10%. Okay, I need to question that. So as you're reading the requirements and the exhibits, what I sometimes suggest is highlight them in a different color, maybe blue for assumptions. As you're reading the scenario, go, forecast sales are going to grow at 12% a year. I'm going to highlight that blue. There's an assumption I need to challenge. So get used to that as you're reading the scenarios, just thinking, okay, I need to get that down and challenge that assumption. But also, they really like it for commercial acumen if you can relate answers to the real world. I'll get you guys involved at this point. What's going on in the world at the moment that could affect business decisions? Has anyone got any? Now, I don't want you to get any all political on me or anything, so just be very objective and just put into the chat. Is anything going on in the world that could affect the world global business? What's happening at the moment that could... Trump, says Frederick. I'm like, okay, tariffs, perfect. So yeah, lots of stuff on that. Interest rates as well, Laxmi, brilliant shout. Yeah, I like that a lot. So in the UK, interest rates have just fallen this week. So for any hedging stuff, that could affect it. AI, good point as well. Yeah, minimum wage changes, good point. But yeah, tariff and environmental pressure as well. That's a great shout. Inflation, all really, really good ideas. Foreign exchange differences. So again, you don't need to go into loads of detail and you don't need to be an expert on that stuff. But if you're challenging an assumption and it says, you're doing a project in a new country for the first time, and you might want to say, well, this assumes that there aren't going to be any tariffs introduced, which could impact our decision going forwards. Or if it's a hedging question, you could say, well, actually, interest rates have just fallen in the UK. So if they do continue to fall, maybe they shouldn't hedge. So all of those sorts of things we need to look out for. Sam, I told you not to be political. Okay, so there we go. That's our high quality answers. That's what we're going to be looking out for. So yeah, some great ideas in there, which is brilliant. Okay, so final takeaway tips from the examiner report that I want you to remember. Firstly, allocate your time to each requirement and stick to it. So I'm going to talk about timings in a few minutes, but you've got to stick to those timings. Very, very important you do that. Plan and structure your answers properly. So lay them out really nicely. Label what you're doing. Make it nice and clear and easy to mark. Answer the question that they've set you and all bits of it. Now, a common thing students like to do is answer the question they wish they'd been set. And they think, I prepared a question just like this last week. I'm going to answer that one instead. That's not going to get you any marks. You've got to answer the question they've asked you. Don't give up. Never, ever give up. And that OFR, do you remember the own figure rule, is really important. So even if your numbers are completely off, you'll still get the marks if your workings are correct. So just keep going. Never give up. And work on those professional skills marks. I'm going to talk about my YouTube channel a bit later, but I did a video all about professional skills marks on there. So if you need a bit more help on those, feel free to check that out. And then the absolute key to success in AFM is practice. Practice, 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 practice. Do as many questions as you can, and you'll start seeing similar little things coming up, similar little tips and tricks, and then you'll be in a really good position in the exam. There we go. So that's it from the examiner report. So I've condensed that into as many tips as I can give you as humanly possible. What I want to show you now is how you can use ACCA Study Hub to really further your revision and your understanding of these topics. So the Study Hub's got loads of great stuff in here. So you've got exam style questions to practice in there. You've also got loads of sort of really technical bits and resources. and some numerical examples. So there's a collar, there's a bit there on treasury, for example, which would have really helped with that North Nico question 1, for example. So lots of bits in there which are really useful. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and I'll show you exactly where you could have used in the study hub. So I've just hit share screen. Hopefully you can see that now. So this is ACCA Study Hub. Again, a brilliant free resource. So just want to pick out a few things that would have really helped you guys if you were doing that exam. For example, that big treasury discussion part, chapter 17, international operations. And then in part 3 of that, the international treasury function, you can see there. And then look, the role of international treasury. So we've got some notes there. What do they do? Again, it's not huge amounts. It's a good level of detail in the study hub. So you can read through that. And again, it gives you an idea of what they're up to. You can move on to the next bit. So should they run it as a cost center or a profit center? Should it be centralized or decentralized? Again, that's a common question. So would we be better having one treasury department for the whole company, or one in each country maybe, or each subsidiary, or whatever it might be? And there's a little bit on that multilateral netting as well that we saw. So when we've got these companies owing each other money, which was also in Northny. Look, if you'd done this example, you'd have been so well prepared. You'd be, oh yeah, great, this is brilliant. And there's another one there for you to practice. So again, loads of great practice questions in there that link exactly to what we've been doing here as well. Now, it's not just the treasury stuff. Obviously, you've got all like the hedging things in here as well. So chapter 15 has got your interest rates, risk management. Just show you quickly collars. So 15.2.2. And here, look, you've got caps, floors, and there you go, collars with an example. So a nice little example in there as well. So giving you just enough information for what you need. Free cash flow valuations was something that students struggled with. So that's in here, chapter 7, free cash flow models. There you go. And there's that difference between the free cash flows to equity and free cash flows to firm. And gives you, again, thinking about weaknesses of the method. So that's great for your assumptions in there as well. So loads of great stuff around the theory to top up your knowledge in there. But equally important, and again, especially at this point with only 3 and a bit weeks until the March exam, if that's the exam you're doing, you've got practice questions. So you've got ACCA's practice platform with the mock exams, and you've got specimen exams and past exams. But then there are even more questions in here. So again, a couple of good ones in here. Chapter 14, the foreign exchange risk management. This one, Kenduri. You hit start practice. This one, there you go, multilateral netting again. So you got that whole process there. Then in this one, you also had some currency options to practice, and then some interest rates. So again, a really, really good one to calculate and to practice. And what you can do is you can do your answer, and then you can confirm. Then it does reveal the answers. So you can, once you've given it a quick go, it does then reveal the answers. So again, that's really useful to look at. And again, there's another one in chapter 8 for the valuation stuff. So there's some really good questions in here around that as well. So yeah, a few, that one's good. For example, that Solonco, that's a good one for you to practice as well. So yeah, loads of questions. Again, loads of good things. If it says exam format revision questions, that's got like professional marks in. There are some more a bit further down, other revision questions, like Sigger and McConis. These are questions that I like quite a lot. These aren't exam stylers. Look, they haven't got professional marks. These are sort of older ones, but still useful to build up your knowledge. So not exactly as it will look in the exam, but still really good for you to practice. So don't be afraid to have a go at those as well. Okay, so there you go. Loads of amazing stuff on the Study Hub. Definitely a good resource for you to use. There are also some quizzes along the way, flashcards, which might be useful for your revision as well. So again, make the most of that. It's such a good resource that ACCA offers. So please make sure you get the most out of that. Good work. Right. I've got a few minutes to run through some exam strategies. So some tips for you, and then I'm going to hand over to you guys, and I'm going to answer your questions at the end. So manage your time. Again, as I said earlier, if you do this properly in the exam, you'll probably be okay. Like whenever my students come out of the exam and they message me again and they say, I'm finished. I go, right, how did you get on? My first question to them is, did you answer everything? did you get through the exam? And when they reply and going, yeah, I answered everything, I go, yes, that is probably a pass, because I answered it all. It's great. It's when students say, oh, yeah, I didn't get on to question 3. Then I'm going, oh, this is going to be tough, because they're going to need to got 50 out of 75 marks effectively, aren't they? They're going to have to do really, really well, almost get 67% on the bits that they did answer. So this is the number one thing. And here you go. Here's my little phrase or expression. If you answer every requirement, and you have a great chance of passing. So if you answer every single bit, you've got a really good chance of passing this exam. Now, you'll see this in my mock debrief videos that I do for ACCA on YouTube, if you've ever seen these. But this is my approach to the exam. For the 50-mark questions, that's 98 minutes if you apply 1.95 minutes per mark. So I always suggest you spend the first 18 minutes reading and planning your answer. So read the requirements, get your answer set up, including the report format, headings and subheadings, and then you can go and read the exhibits. Now, again, on my YouTube channel that I'll tell you about later, I did a video like what to do in the first 5 minutes of the AFM exam. And that includes setting up the report format for the 50-mark questions. So you might want to check that out. Again, I'll show you exactly what I do in the first 5 minutes and get the answer set up. That then leaves you with a nice round 80 minutes to actually write up your answers and do the calculations. So that's 2 minutes per mark. Now, some of you are thinking, hang on, 80 minutes, 2 minutes per mark. That's only 40 marks. Remember, there are 10 marks in here for professional skills marks. So they're sort of embedded throughout. So that does leave 2 minutes per mark, and you can be really strict with that. So if there's an MPV in part A that's 15 marks, times it by 2, give yourself 30 minutes to do that MPV, look at the clock, and you might even want to write down the time and say, well, I need to stop this when there's only 2 hours 45 left on the clock, or whatever, 2 hours 20 left on the clock. And then you need to just stop and move on. So even if you're like, oh, I haven't quite finished the MPV, put down a number, do your best, get a number, move on to the next bit. So you've got to be so strict with your timings here. With the 25-mark questions, nice and easy, you just half that. So it's 49 minutes. You're going to spend 9 minutes reading and planning it. So again, read the requirements, plan out your answer at the start with all the headings and the subheadings, and then read the exhibits. And then you can go into your writing. And that's 40 minutes, which will again be 2 minutes per mark. Now, the 25-mark questions are a bit nicer because you don't have to worry about the report format, do you? So you don't have to worry about that layout for the big 50-mark question. But again, the main thing there is about that point at the bottom. Be strict. So be very strict with yourself and move on once the time is up. Now, the next thing, my next tip is to practice. So just want you to look at that image. We've got 3 weeks to go. At this point, theory and just reading textbooks is probably not going to be the best strategy. Practicing, okay, it's good. Yeah, practicing really, really important. But how much you learn from your mistakes is huge. So when you then practice, you need to then review the answers, and ideally you'll get feedback or you get marked by a tutor if possible. Then you can see where the mistakes are, and you learn so much from those. You go, oh, okay, I did that slightly off, or that wasn't quite right. So really important. Also, honestly, mistakes are the best thing to happen to you because you learn from them. Yeah, if people just went through and if you were just doing questions and they were really easy and you weren't making any mistakes, you're not learning anything. So see mistakes as a positive. Lots of people go, it's 3 weeks till the exam. I got that question wrong. I can't believe it. It's like, okay, I always say, like, it's fine. What you've done there is you've learned from that, and now you're not going to make that mistake on exam day. Yeah, that's great that just happened, that you got that question wrong or you misread that requirement. That's brilliant. That's great news, because now you're not going to do that on exam day. You've learned from it. So see mistakes as a real positive. Even at this point with 3 weeks to go, honestly, it's fine. Making mistakes is the way to progress. So things I recommend you do. Full exams on the practice platform. You've got the pre-March 2025 mock available. So definitely do that one. And then the debrief videos do also appear soon. So you'll see that, and you'll see me. I think one of the videos is me doing the debrief. So you'll see me again. So say hello when you see me pop up in that video. ACCA are incredibly generous in that they've given you 9 recent exams. Now, some of those are full exams, some are sort of hybrid exams. But there you go. That's 27 questions for you to practice. And if you do all of those, then you're going to be in a great position. So there are loads of really good resources on the practice platform. Now, do them to time. There's no point saying, oh, yeah, I'm great at AFM. It takes me 7 hours to do an exam, but I get it all right. Because that's not how it happens on exam day. Get yourself a timer. So if you haven't got one, or again, just ask your smart speaker to set a time, whatever it is, put it on your phone, and then do them under time conditions. That's so valuable to get used to that exam pressure. And then, yeah, debrief them fully. You can use the examiner comments. If it's the past exams, mark plans and things, you can work through those and you can have a look. So really, really valuable doing that as well. So other resources to help you with 3 weeks to go before the exam. You've got ACCA examiner reports and technical articles, which are brilliant for the exam, as you've seen in this session. So lots of great things on there. You've got ACCA's student study support YouTube channel. So there are some topic explainers, the webinars. I did a webinar in December called Inside the Mind of the Markers, which looked at how the marking works in AFM. So very similar to this one, but all about the marking. So that's a great one to check out. And again, you've got the mock debriefs on there as well. Loads of brilliant resources. And as I mentioned, you've got my YouTube as well. So it's Andrew Mower AFM on YouTube. And then I'm also on LinkedIn and I'm posting tips on there. So feel free to have a look. So again, lots of technique, some study tips and advice on there as well. So again, ACCA are incredibly generous with the amount of resources they give you to help you pass this exam. Make the most of it. There's loads of great stuff out there. You need to make the most of it. Okay, right. I said I'd give you 15 minutes for Q&A, and we are bang on schedule. So over to you guys, and I'm going to check out the Q&A now. As I mentioned at the start, feel free to fire away with your questions, and I'm going to have a look. I'm going to go right back to the start and answer them in order. You can keep them coming in, and the guys behind the scenes are sort of pushing those questions through, and I'll have a look. Right. So Charles, you asked, where do you think you should be at this point for the exam? Where should you be at? Right. With 3.5 weeks to go for the March exam, ideally, you are pretty much done with your learning. So you're not really taking on any new information at this point. You are revising, and you should really be in the depths of question practice. Now, if you haven't got through all the content yet, I mean, obviously you're up against it slightly, but the best approach from here is to really keep practicing questions. If there are topics that come up that you're not sure about, then you can go away and read about them. So it might be using the study hub or your materials. So yeah, practicing questions is the absolute key thing at this point. Again, if you find yourself with knowledge gaps, then you can go back and have a look at the content. But again, ideally, again, I'm not saying everyone's going to be in this position, but ideally, you'll be pretty much done in terms of learning the content. You should be fairly in revision mode at this point. Right, Durga, you asked how to get the professional marks. Now, I touched on this a bit there. And again, I did a whole video on the professional marks on my YouTube. So have a look at that video. In summary, you've got communication, which is only in the big 50 mark question. So that's about getting the report format nicely done, answering in a professional tone, having things like an introduction and a conclusion. I saw a little debate in the chat panel when I opened it earlier saying, can I do all my discussion in the spreadsheet? No, you need to do your discussion parts in the word processor. So again, that's a communication point, is about making sure you are using the correct responses. Calculations, spreadsheet. Words, word processor. Job done. So stick to that and you'll be fine. So there you go. So there's that. So there your communication. You've then got analysis and evaluation, which is about using the data correctly and drawing conclusions from it. So making sure you're actually advising based on the numbers you've done. And then you've got skepticism, which we've touched on, challenging those assumptions, questioning the data you've been provided with. And finally, you've got commercial acumen, which is using the exhibit. And a little tip on commercial acumen, make sure you keep referencing the company in the exhibit and discussing the industry they're in. So if it says they're a clothes manufacturer called, I don't know, Radiator Co., the first thing I could see, keep mentioning Radiator Co. and say, oh, they're in the clothes industry. Yeah, make little points like, oh, this will be very dependent on the latest fashion trends, or we need to be careful of environmental and sustainability points, because a lot of customers are very conscious of where that's been. We need to think about ethics in terms of suppliers and not using child labor. So, you can make little points relevant to that industry, which will really help with those commercial acumen marks as well. Okay. So Vida, you said what to write in the theory if it's based on answering part A and you have not received any figures. Okay, hopefully I covered that video. I saw that question came quite early on in the session. So make up a number is what I do. So if you're stuck and you're like, oh, I can't do the calculations, but I want to discuss the valuation, or I will need to discuss what I've done in part A, put some numbers in. You can just put like assumed it's this or whatever, or you can sort of have a little guess. And just then discuss it based on the numbers that you've put in. Obviously, ideally, you'd at least have a go at the calculations, but if you're completely lost, chuck some numbers in and discuss them. Durga said, any tips for theory questions? So a couple. So firstly, headings are really important in the theory questions and subheadings. A lot of the time it's, maybe critically evaluate or discuss whether. And if you can split that into two subheadings and say, yes, this is correct, no, this isn't correct, or advantages, disadvantages, or something, those 8 marks suddenly become 2 lots of 4, which is a lot easier, isn't it? If you can break it up into those bits. So if you can, with the theory questions, read the requirement carefully and break it into subheadings. That's a really nice tip. Aim for 1 point or 1 paragraph per mark, and that can just be short, concise paragraphs with 2 or 3 marks. And then the biggest tip, Durga, as you've seen from the examiner report today, use the exhibits. So with the theory questions, use the exhibits. Read them carefully. A lot of the time there are clues in there and things that you can bring into your answer. So make sure you use those. Okay, Antoinette, you asked, do you get carry error marks? So yeah, again, hopefully I've covered that throughout this session. If you get the MPV wrong, that's negative, and then you say, reject the MPV because it's negative, but actually it should have been positive, you'd still get the credit for saying, reject. So you get credit for your discussion based on the numbers you've got, because you can't do anything else, because you're not going to discuss other things just in case. So that's fine. Vidi, you asked another one, which was, do you lose professional marks if you directly calculate the MPV through the formula, or do you have to mention table numbers? Good question. No, I highly recommend that you do use the MPV function. I wouldn't use the tables probably at all in this exam anymore. I'm a massive fan of equals MPV. You put the rate percentage. Just remember that you only do year 1 onwards, don't you? Then you have to separately include the year 0 figure if you're using the MPV function. No, in actual fact, the examiners have said, using the functions is good, and it does help with communication as well. So just don't worry about that. Doan said, do I need to write OFR in the exam? Good question. And I had someone do this recently. No, don't write OFR. OFR is the thing that the markers use when they're marking it. So don't write that. That's like you saying, I know I've got this wrong, but please give me the marks. That's just like a marking thing that they use, OFR, own figure rule. Don't write that in your own exams. No, not for you to put in there. Anise, you said, does hedging question also apply own figure mark? Yep. Yeah. So again, if you get your number of contracts wrong in a futures question, and then you carry on working through using that wrong figure, it's all good. You'll still get those marks. Yeah, not a problem. Just keep going. Mohammed's asking, Mohammed, this is ambitious. Can I learn everything and practice and revise in the next 3 weeks? It's a very personal thing. A lot of people say, how much do I need to study? It's going to be very, very tough for you. But again, you're going to have to really build up on the content and try and get into question practice as much as possible. So, I'd say it's going to be tough, but you can, if you've already booked the exam, you can try it and see how you get on. But I'd always recommend with AFM studying over a longer period. Even like sort of 3 months is ideal, just to gradually build up your knowledge. So Suman, you said if you've gone wrong, again, I think I've covered that by, as long as your discussion's right, you'll be fine. Daniel said, should we include synergy on the pre or post acquisition or merger? It'll be the post acquisition. So it'll be, synergy won't exist before. You have 2 companies individually. That's like the pre-acquisition values. They'll then merge. At that point, you'll get the synergy. So it will only be the post-acquisition thing that we'll include the synergy. Raj, you said, can you show the format of the report to the shareholders? Do you just mean report format in general? That's, again, have a look at my video on YouTube, which is called like what to do in the first 5 minutes of the exam. And I'll show you how to do report format. So yeah, you can see that there. Again, I haven't got time now, but I can do that. Maria, you said, should I keep going? Should I go through the study hub at this point or keep going through questions? Just keep doing questions. Keep doing questions at this point, definitely. Ella, if you make up a figure to discuss, do you need to tell the markers? Yeah, you can write sort of like assume next to it or something if you want to, but it doesn't matter too much. If you just do it and just keep going, it'll be okay. Emma's asked about rounding. Will you lose marks for rounding? It's a good question, Emma. Again, I know I sort of keep referencing these videos, but I did a video yesterday called AFM. What did I call it? Like essentially about like the AFM software, like seven things you need to know about the AFM software. In that video, I do a little thing about say you do a working in an MPV, and then you need to copy those numbers into the MPV. I think that's the issue you're saying, and some people almost like just copy down the numbers, because if you copy and paste, it copies the formulae, doesn't it? And then it doesn't work. But what you can do is you can do equals, and then click on the cell in your workings, and then drag that across, and it pulls all those numbers through, and then it'll be okay. So have a look at that if you need. But yeah, you don't need to worry about it too much. Emma, yeah, there are a few more videos coming on there, but yeah, there are a few on there. Okay, Hitika said, in hedging questions, will you only get one exercise price, or will there be a whole table of exercise prices? It could be either. They can just give you one exercise price, in which case, great, you can use it. They might give you a few, in which you need to decide which exercise price is going to be best for the company. Now, you can do that by working out which rate's best once you factor in the premium. So you can do a little work in there. You can do the full working for both and show both of them, like both exercise prices and what would happen. That's often what they do in the answers. But yeah, I tend to do an approach where I work out which exercise price, once you factor in the premium for both, would be best, and then choose that one. And then that will get you the marks as well. So that's fine. Sarisha, you said, what are the tips you give to the people who failed at 47 to 49 marks? Listen to everything that the examiner report said and everything I've told you today. And yeah, really focus on those discussion marks. Get those professional skills marks that I've talked about. Again, 20 professional skills marks. I can't stop saying that because it's huge. If you get those, you only need to get 30 other marks to pass this exam. So really focus on getting those and being skeptical, showing commercial acumen, and that'll easily get you over the line if you were borderline. So yeah, keep working at that and you'll be fine, and just keep practicing. Right, other questions? Right, Nurul's literally just said, can you predict the topic of question 1? I can't believe no one's asked what's going to be in the exam, which is the common thing. I don't know, and there are different questions that the examining team set, so I'm not sure. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same as the mock exam. So don't read, oh, because the mock exam had that in question 1, it's going to be that again. It doesn't work like that. So keep preparing. Remember, things that will come up, valuations really common, like MPV or investment appraisal of some sort, and hedging. So they're all really, really important things to revise. I'd also make sure you revise BSOP, the Black-Scholes option pricing model. So that's a great thing to revise, just in case that comes up as well. Okay, other questions? Oh God, we've got loads. I'm trying to do as many as I can. Yeah, I think a lot of those we've covered, which is great. Does hedging use the own figure rule? Yeah, I've applied that one. So Andrew asked about hedging. You're struggling with that, and again, hedging is one of those where it's really about practicing. Now, a few of you are asking about this this step-by-step thing that I mentioned around hedging. As I said, the pre-March mock 2025, the hedging question is, I've done the debrief for it, so that gets released on ACCA's YouTube channel over the next few days. So check that out, because I go through like the steps for that, and when you're doing that, so have a look at yeah, have a look at how I do that and that process, and that will really help you as well, Andrew. And you guys asking about the step-by-step, you'll see that as well. Okay, there are a few things around exam centres that I don't want to do because they can be quite specific. And then report format again, yeah, have a look at the video that I mentioned, and you've got that. And the last one, this will be my last answer one. So, Eileen, you said, is it better to put full amount or the number just to the thousands or millions? Either's fine, whatever you want. You can just put, if you're going to do it in thousands, I'll just label it at the top that you're doing it in thousands. I actually prefer doing things probably in thousands or millions just because it's a bit neater. If you do it to the nearest dollar, it can get, like, the numbers can get massive. So yeah, as long as you label it, and I'd look at how they've given you the information and the data in the question and be led by that, and then you're good to go. Okay, there you go. Isabel, over to you. Hopefully I've answered as many questions as I possibly can. Sorry if I didn't get onto yours, but